Talk of the Town is up and running in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, USA. I'm Scott Montesano, and this is where the Chippewa Valley comes to talk. Hello to everybody out there. Only show this week. I know that the tears are flowing. I know people have got to have that drip pan underneath their chins with the tears over that. But the only show of this week, as Thursday, we've got some other things going on, so no show later on this week. So the only show of this week is today, so make sure you most definitely savor it. It's like when you were growing up and it was a huge deal to go out to eat, like going to Red Lobster was something that you would do once a year, and it was a huge deal, so you would really nibble those Cheddar Bay biscuits because you never knew when you would go back. Savor this. Big thank you, because this is Veterans Day when we are doing this podcast. Big thank you to all the veterans out there. And I sent out the tweet earlier today, and I do mean it. I will always I will always provide out there a false bravado. But in all honesty, those, whether you saw actual combat or you were stationed in a tropical paradise during peacetime, regardless of the scenario, if you have served our nation, you've got bigger cojones than me. The men and women that have done so, thank you so much. From those who, again, have been on the front lines in the middle of death, to those that have been part of the support staff back on bases and what have you. Big thank you to all of you for the various sacrifices that you have made. And one thing that I know for a lot of veterans, especially if you enjoy what you're doing, even when somebody comes up and thanks you, you're a florist, and somebody thanks you for what you did, sometimes you're humbled by it, and you don't know what to do because you're like, I like doing this. Don't thank me like don't thank me because I like doing this. It's one of those weird things. And I know for a lot of veterans it's the same way, but most definitely let's thank all the veterans who are out there. And this is something, thanking veterans has become somewhat performative over the years. There are sports teams that use it as a way to sell sponsorships. There's TV stations locally, if you listen to Dan Marcon's podcast, who use it as a revenue generator. Hey, spend money on this ad as we thank veterans. It becomes performative. And people put out their social media postings, and they can be performative at times. But despite all of that, I do think there is a genuine gratitude. And I hope my sense on that is correct. I really do. I do believe there is a genuine gratitude to the thanking of service members out there, and I hope my sense on that is correct. Looking forward to this weekend. I might see some of you out there. I'm going to be at the Pablo Center on Sunday. The country act Black Hawk performing Sunday night, and I'm looking forward to it. I can't think of one Black Hawk song. I'm sure once they start to sing, I'll be like, oh, I remember that one. Black Hawk was part of really the country revolution of the 90s when it kind of went away from those who really like country music, and I'm not really one of them, but those that are real country music aficionados, there was the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and then you forget about the 80s. Because country music didn't know what it was doing. They had this new toy called the synthesizer, and while 80s gumball pop was able to really find great ways to utilize it, country music had no idea. Country music, looking at the synthesizer and some of the digital toys of the 80s, was no different than Neanderthal caveman staring at a wheel. Well, wait, what are we supposed to do with this thing? But then you get to the 90s, and then you had the stories. Country music songs in the 90s had a lot of stories to them, told a whole story in 3 minutes. So I'm looking forward to hearing what some of Blackhawks music is. Look forward to going there an evening with my wife and I. And I've said this before, when it comes to the Pablo, and as the Sonatag hopefully has more events, sometimes just take the plunge on things. What's the worst that can happen? You don't enjoy it? You still have a fun night. I said this before. I went to go see Amy Grant 2 months ago, and I knew 1 or 2 songs that she sung. And if somebody said, if she comes back and somebody says, do you want to go back to see Amy Grant? I'd say, nah, I'm good. Did I love the show? Not really. But was it a miserable experience? Absolutely not. Went out. Big crowd at the Pablo. It was still fun to be a part of the energy and the atmosphere. It was not a waste of time, nor money, nor anything like that. Which is why, again, I recommend to all of you out there, take the plunge and do something. And then learned today, Chris Cruzy is going to be the opening act for the show on Sunday. Never heard Chris Cruzy perform, actually. Now, Chris was a part of one of our podcasts a couple of years ago. Chris Cruzy was a guest on Coffee at the Cottage with Emily. Emily brought Chris Cruziani. I remember he was a very fascinating interview and told the whole story of being on The Voice and how he has maintained still these Western Wisconsin roots and how he came into performing and how he just likes to perform. So looking forward to actually hearing Chris Cruzy perform on Sunday. Another thing, by the way, remember, Visit Eau Claire does their podcast with us, the Oh, the Places We'll Go podcast series, and a new one dropping later this month. Saw they're doing the curd crawl again. So it's one of these things to you see this once in a while, whether it's a media entity doing it or somebody like a tourism bureau might do this. You have restaurant weeks and stuff like that. The idea being that you get these various business partners, restaurant partners on board, and people are to try to visit each one and cross them off their list. I didn't do all the research on it quite yet. I think you're supposed to go visit all of them, and you might get something if you get a check mark for visiting all the places that are part of the curd crawl. Try the various deep-fried cheese curds at various establishments in and around Eau Claire. I'm more disappointed that we just lined up our next Visit Eau Claire gave me the next topic that we're going to cover for the podcast that's going to drop later this month, and it's going to be a great topic. Very timely topic and great guest and all of that, but I'm a little disappointed it's not they're not highlighting the curd crawl. Would have liked to have had the curd crawl. Let me hedge that, though. I would have liked to have talked about the curd crawl if we were going to be at one of the establishments enjoying curds in the process. Otherwise, it'd be a tease. It would truly be like putting a bowl of deep-fried cheese curds just out of your reach while you run on a treadmill. If we had taught the curd crawl with somebody, but I didn't get a chance to actually enjoy any curds. But we will instead actually be talking something else for their episode later this month. And again, a still very great topic that we will be covering. We won't be with you on Thursday. By the time many of you hear this show, you'll already know the result. But on Tuesday night, they're expecting the City Council, the Eau Claire City Council, to vote on that proposed increase in the wheel tax. Go for basically a doubling of it, up to $50. Vote on Tuesday. People came out in opposition on Monday. It was not a huge turnout of opposition. I think it was maybe they said 10 or 11 people spoke out against the wheel tax, which we've seen other public hearings bring out more. But I think, sadly, a lot of people think the decision has already been made, and in reality, it probably already has. But people came out and spoke out in opposition to the wheel tax. People made some great points. Hey, I have to drive to work. It's cost me X amount of dollars already. This is just added to this. Hey, let's not forget, in the nothing happens in a vacuum. Just look at the last several weeks in this country and people having to scrape things together. And you want more money from me for this? This is a doubling of something. But Director of City Finance, Jay Winzance, spoke out on Monday as well, and he let the city council know, kind of reminded them, that the wheel tax increase has already been baked into their budget. So if the wheel tax is not passed, there will be a deficit that would have to be remedied. So this likely will pass. In the end, and this is what some people on the council will say, and Czar Stephanie Hirsch will say, it's only $50. And it's only an additional $25. And this is for the whole year. It's like one of those ads that goes out there. Hey, for pennies a day, you can be part of for pennies a day, you can be a part of the Napkin of the Week Club. Each week we'll send you a new napkin. Same thing here. $50 total. It's still not a lot for a whole year. Just a couple of dollars a month. However, this is no different than the slow increases in streaming services, in your gym membership, in a lot of things that are membership models, and the slow increases that have been occurring. And at one point, what once made sense for you to start off with, and it matched value that you saw, no longer does the value match. And mind you, a lot of these streaming services and gym memberships and all of that, the idea is, from a business standpoint, that it's a recurring membership. They don't each year ask you to re-up. It just automatically rolls over. And part of that idea is, yes, they hope you forget it and it just keeps reoccurring each year. But also, they don't simply want you to have a moment to think if the value's matching up. And a lot of times you have to take a step back and go, if I was to sign up for this now, would this be worth it? Well, no. It was worth it 5 years ago, and in the 5 years since, the streaming service hasn't really improved its quality and this and that. And what was once, $1 is now asking me to pay $4, and it's not. I wouldn't do that. With the wheel tax, it's not quite the same thing because it is a little bit more of a necessity to have to drive than a streaming service is. But same thing applies. You wouldn't start off by charging people $50 right now. And as a couple of people made a great point on Monday, and we've said the same thing, how much have costs risen because of needs with the roads? And how much have they risen due to wants? And sometimes you need to maybe experience life without something for a bit. I will say this, the roads here, having lived other places, having, in the summertime, other places, the roads here are ultra smooth. Joke all you want. Everybody wants their roads better. The roads here are very good. They are very good in Eau Claire. Now, everybody's roads will struggle in March and April coming out of the winter, but you get the idea. They're very good. If we spent less, will we notice a decrease? Probably, but it wouldn't be overnight. It's not as though all of a sudden, within a week, the streets in downtown Eau Claire will look like old dirt roads from the 1800s with carriage wheel ruts in them, complete with horse manure as well. So that's my thing. We have to start to learn what are the needs, what are the wants. And it does get messy as well, because part of this may be some people lose their job. Cutting off a couple of staff members doesn't automatically fix everything. It does. Maybe part of a solution. All of that. We really have to look at what are the needs, what are the wants. Universally across the board, people are not for this. And a lot of people, a lot of smart people in the area are really starting to ask questions of what are we getting for what we're already paying for? On top of this, you're going to charge for parking in downtown, which a year from now, all right, Stephanie Hirsch, not Dave Solberg. Dave Solberg is the fall guy always for Stephanie Hirsch. But Stephanie Hirsch and the city council, if downtown Eau Claire has lost any of its momentum a year from now, they're going to have hell to pay with that. But again, I have a feeling I'm farting into the wind with this. If you're listening to this and it's Wednesday or Thursday and they voted it down, you almost want to go and say, hey, Scotty, if you only knew. But the reality is I think it's going to pass. The director of finance, Jay Winzan, saying what he did pretty much tells you the decision was already made. Because are they going to go back to the drawing board and cut other things? No. All right. So speaking of the city of Eau Claire and the area in general, over the weekend, I saw a suggested post that came up on my Facebook page. And it was a very, very long one, but I think it's one that is something that makes you really think. We've kind of touched on it here and there indirectly, and I think a lot of you talk of the town indirectly. You've talked about it yourselves. Chad Rowekamp is a name you sometimes hear pop up in this area. He is a community activist, community bugler type of person, rallies support for various causes, this and that, things in neighborhoods. Chad Rowekamp. He is passionate, he's vocal, and he puts his actions where his mouth points a lot of times. But this weekend, he made a social media post. One of those posts that typically you're not going to read because it's very long. Again, your Facebook page should be nothing more than photos of your family, photos of some funny stuff, and leave it there. But, as I said, he's a community activist, community bugler. He wants to be somebody in the community, so you tend to use your social media for that kind of thing. But this weekend, he made a social media post questioning the direction of the growth of Eau Claire, citing that the growth of Eau Claire has come with neighborhood disengagement, small business turnover, aging public spaces, and that basically the area, while it has gained people, is losing passion for the community itself. His message is if people don't feel connected and or care about the community they live in, this is simply a place. It's not a home. My take is at first, honestly, I felt a little put off by what he said. And I still do with some of the specifics. He cites indie music as a strength. He takes a pot shot at tourism. He takes a pot shot at national change. He argues we don't need to be the next Minneapolis or Madison. And what scares me about those statements is it makes it feel like you are scared to grow. And when I hear people say, we don't want to be the next Minneapolis or Madison, are you scared to grow? Now, there's other deeper things there. Remember, Kerry Kincaid, years ago as the council president, about a decade ago, predicted we'd be the next Portland, Oregon because of indie music and all of that. She was talking more from what the culture of the area would be. And I don't necessarily want our culture of the area to be duplicate of other areas, but I do want the growth to be there. If you're not growing, you are dying. This is not the community it was 30 years ago. Heck, it's not the community it was 15 years ago, and you have to kind of accept that. This area is now growing. It very much is. More people coming in. However, despite all of that, the things that I initially disagree with on the statement, what Chad said, and I know many of you to some extent agree with this lack of community feel. We are like hungry diners at 6 p.m. We may not agree on what to eat, but we know we all want to eat. We all agree kind of to the same thing. I agree this area, especially in the last 10 years since I moved back, has lost a sense of civic pride and community. We are in a transitional time in this area. You have lots of new people that have come in. You've got lots of growth. That is great. That is not a bad thing. The fact that we are expanding, the fact there are more housing developments, that is good. And I will always say, if you're going to complain and bitch and moan about the development on the southern end of the town, then get out at this point. You bought your property. I will, to some extent, have the empathy for the people that have lived in the rural parts of the town of Washington, for instance, that their family has been there since the 1960s. There was no thought of the community ever building out that way. But a lot of the people that are bitching are people that bought their homes around 07, 08, 09, and even sooner. And what they want is they want to have vast amounts of land but still be 5 minutes away from a Walmart. Okay? That's not how this works. We've got lots of new people, though. We got lots of growth. That's great. However, the new people coming in, they don't have blood in the ground yet. And because we are so connected via the internet, they don't have to be connected locally. I'll use sports as an example. It used to be, a generation ago, if you moved into a town, you might be a fan of the Walla Walla Wombats, but you're not going to really be able to follow the Walla Walla Wombats all that much. So you're going to kind of adopt to some extent the local teams, the local minor league teams, the local college teams, all that. Now you don't have to do that. If you move in from the Twin Cities or you move up from Chicago, you don't have to go to a Blue Gold game or an Express game. You'll just sit home and watch your sports on TV because you don't have to care about anything locally. And on top of that, with all of the same thing with music and plays and all of that, I'll just wait till I go back home for that sort of thing. And maybe you're slow to get involved in various things that are going on in the community. You don't have that blood in the ground. A small example as well, we had that show, The Banquet with a Beer, a couple weeks ago, in which Eric Regg from Silver Springs Food talked about them creating, with the help of CVT, trying to create a signature sandwich for the area. And you can go back and listen to that episode. But think about this. They came out with that in April, the signature sandwich. I think they got one place to put it on the menu, and the place took it off the menu. Local restaurants have refused to put it on the menu. Not because it's some disgusting sandwich or anything like that, but because it's like, why? There is now what is this area's hook, if you will? What is this area's foothold? What does give us civic pride? This area is not a music factory. This is not an art space. This is not a historical area. It is not a sports area anymore. What this area is at the moment is a bowl of buttered noodles. Popular, gets the job done, but there isn't anything that is, again, that noteworthy thing, which is stunning to admit with all that's been added. But what truly gives us civic pride anymore? And I know Chad brought up indie music. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you could really make that argument. You can't now. Oh, are there people creating stuff? Absolutely, there's people creating stuff. But that's not the hook anymore. There's not that hook anymore. There's a lot of people that are interested in sports here, but it's not a big sports area anymore. If anything, this area is kind of leaned more like Duluth in that there's people that are active in sports, but Duluth has been long known as a horrible spectator sports town. And this area is starting to get that reputation. Whereas that was not the case when I first moved to town. So you've seen that change. In the end, I think it's something you have to really look at as a community. You're losing that civic pride. You're losing a community engagement. And what can be done to kind of change that a little bit. Some of it is natural. Some of it, when you're in a transitional time, there's only so much you can try to force it. There is a whole new group of people that have come in, and the hope is, as people come in, heck, I'm a transplant. The whole idea, though, is hopefully people come in, and maybe it's not that person in their 20s, their 30s, that's moved into town now, but maybe their kids. Hopefully they have kids. That's a whole other show. But the next generation has more, again, blood in the ground, and they've got that passion and that pride. And maybe we just have to start to really, one thing my area where I grew up still has is Utica, New York. There's great pride in the area. There's pride in that. And part of when you have pride in an area, too, is when you have experienced a traumatic event in a town. And I'm not saying something that's devastating in terms of some very naughty stuff, but maybe a massive closure, massive, economic blow, something like that. My area had a lot of them. And the area of Utica has now reinvented itself. There's a lot more momentum, and there's this pride, grit. This area obviously had the Uniroyal situation. I think that, the people that stayed behind, I think that rallied a lot of people. The hospital closure a little different. That it had, from a monetary standpoint, similar issues, and societal issues, but I think from a cultural standpoint, just different. I don't know. Chad brings up, what's happening, neighborhood block parties and stuff like that. I think that would be cool to have, and I think that's something that has to be on a grassroots level and all that. And I don't necessarily have an answer. This isn't something that you can market. It's not something that you can really market. It's something that has to start from inside of all of us in the area. Civic pride, civic engagement, wanting to see Eau Claire do well, wanting to see other towns do well. Just something to think about. It's not that there's an answer to this. Just something to really think about with that. So kind of happy I saw that post come down from Chad. As I said, I don't necessarily agree with maybe some of his methods as to how he would do it, but at the same time, the way I put it is, we're like hungry people at a diner at 6 o'clock. We might not agree on what to eat, but we know we want to eat. All right, back with you next week. We'll have shows next Tuesday and Thursday of next week. On behalf of everyone who made this podcast possible, I'm Scott Montesano, saying there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow shining at the end of every day. Make sure to take advantage of it. And until next time, so long, everybody.